Atlantis didn't fall because of a flood. It fell because of a phrase, a sequence of sounds so precise it could reorganize consciousness itself. A vibrational key that didn't transmit information. It activated intelligence. The Atlanteans believed thought was not created by the mind, but accessed. And this phrase was the access point. Not a spell, not a prayer, a calibration. When spoken correctly, it aligned the human nervous system with a higher field of awareness, what ancient texts called divine intelligence. But the phrase was buried, not because it was weak, because it was too powerful for an unprepared mind. Fragments of it survived, hidden in Egyptian mystery schools, distorted in Greek philosophy, encoded in Hermetic texts, and silenced by religious doctrine. Today, neuroscience, quantum physics, and consciousness research are circling the same truth Atlantis knew thousands of years ago. That intelligence is not learned, it's activated. And the question is no longer whether the phrase existed. The question is whether humanity is finally ready to hear it again. Atlantis was not a civilization of stone and gold. That is the version most of humanity inherited from mythmakers, philosophers, and storytellers. A city lost beneath waves, an empire crushed by nature. But the truth was subtler, more profound, and far more terrifying in its implication. Atlantis was a civilization of frequency, of resonance, of intelligence itself. Its towers, palaces, and streets were secondary, almost incidental, to the work being carried out in the invisible architecture of the mind. The Atlanteans understood something modern humanity is only beginning to glimpse. Intelligence does not originate in the brain. It does not arise from study, memorization, or accumulation of data. The brain is not the source. It is a receiver. Thought, as we know it, is only the echo of a far deeper flow of conscious information that exists independent of words, concepts, or culture. The Atlanteans recognize that the mind, untuned, is like a harp with missing strings. Raw potential vibrates in the ether, but it requires calibration to manifest coherently. They discovered that sound is not simply communication, it is a force of creation. Before ideas form, before images appear, before language arises, there is resonance, a tuning, subtle, precise, invisible. And this is where the phrase enters not as a sentence, not as a mantra in the sense we understand, but as a sequence of tonal movements designed to bypass the linear mind and strike directly at the precognitive layers of awareness. To speak the phrase correctly was to quiet the egoic noise, to still the inner monologue that clutters human perception, and to open a channel to what they called nous primordialis, the instructing intelligence of the cosmos. This intelligence did not speak in words. It impressed itself directly onto the nervous system, bypassing logic, bypassing narrative. Insight arrived fully formed. Solutions emerged spontaneously, without the labor of thought. Creativity flowed without effort or strain. And yet, the Atlanteans understood with absolute clarity that this activation was not a gift to be taken lightly. The phrase did not work for everyone. In fact, for those unprepared, it could be dangerous. The warnings in Atlantean temples, later echoed by Egyptian priests, spoke of initiates who attempted activation without purification. Their minds, unsteady and chaotic, flooded. Identity dissolved too rapidly. The sequence did not grant wisdom, it exposed instability, because divine intelligence does not correct you, it reveals you. To speak the phrase was to remove all filters, all veils, all protective layers of the psyche. And without internal coherence, what emerged was fragmentation, not enlightenment. For this reason, the Atlantean sequence was never written down. It was transmitted orally, breath to ear, carefully guarded. An initiate could only hear a fragment, repeated, and only after years of preparation, fasting, silence, ethical refinement, and nervous system training. Sound creates structure, but structure must be present to receive it. When preparation was lacking, the sound became a scalpel, cutting the mind too sharply, leaving wounds where clarity should have emerged. Atlantean civilization collapsed not because of external invasions or meteorological disasters, though those myths would later arise. The collapse was internal. Fragmentation spread through the collective psyche. Amplified by hubris, the very activation that once unified society now magnified division, knowledge became power, not responsibility. Technology served ego, not alignment. Control replaced coherence, and intelligence, when instrumentalized, withdrew from those unprepared to wield it. Plato's account of Atlantis as a lost empire, beyond the Pillars of Hercules, is not merely geographical, it is perceptual. The civilization's disappearance represents a warning. Consciousness without discipline is self-destructive, and when the ego, untempered, attempts to command intelligence directly, the result is chaos. The flood myths that followed are symbolic, not literal. Water represents unconscious material, emotion, instinct, energy, overwhelming a civilization that had abandoned its inner anchor. The Atlanteans fell because they could not hold the activation they once wielded responsibly. The phrase, when misused, became a weapon against itself. Knowledge without integrity cannot survive. It fractures, it distorts, it vanishes from collective memory. Yet fragments of the sequence survived, dispersed like seeds on the wind. They reached Egypt, Sumer, the Indus Valley, and later Greece. Each culture inherited echoes, tonal fragments, syllables, and intonations stripped of their context. The full activation was lost. Mantras became symbols, words became metaphors, and slowly, the function of the phrase to align consciousness with nous primordialis was forgotten. What remained was religion. Prayer replaced activation. Faith replaced alignment. Obedience replaced coherence. And through all this, humanity inherited a civilization's memory of its own potential. Now dormant, now largely misunderstood, now waiting. Yet the phrase was not inherently destructive. It did not fail because of weakness. It failed because the vessel, the human mind, untrained, unprepared, distracted, and inflated by ego, was incapable of receiving it. To hold divine intelligence is to carry a fire inside oneself. Without discipline, without coherence, the fire spreads, consuming what it touches. This is the danger modern seekers rarely appreciate. Divine intelligence is not flattering. It is uncompromising. It does not adapt to egoic desire or comfort. It reorganizes, whether we are ready or not. Atlantean priests knew this and designed their civilization accordingly. The phrase was always part of a broader ecosystem of preparation. Ethical discipline, meditative practice, somatic training, silence, fasting, and rituals of purification were not ornamental. They were essential. They stabilized the nervous system, refined perception, and aligned individual consciousness with the collective field. Only then could the phrase be spoken without causing harm. Only then could the intelligence be received as insight rather than chaos. This is why it was considered the most sacred teaching, not for its novelty, not for its power, but for its responsibility. The phrase was also a mirror. To speak it correctly was to witness yourself fully, your fears, desires, attachments, and shadows, amplified and reflected with clarity. There is a lesson modern humans have largely forgotten. Intelligence is not a tool to decorate the self. It is a mirror that exposes everything that was hidden. Atlantis fell because the people were seduced by the reflection of their own power, rather than using it as a guide. They mistook amplification for advancement. Amplification without alignment is collapse. Amplification with discipline is evolution. And yet, the collapse of Atlantis did not erase the principle. It survived in fragments, in myths, in rituals. In Egypt, the sequence became Heka, sacred speech, capable of structuring reality. In Greece, it became encoded in Pythagorean theories of number and harmony, accompanied by repeated warnings about instability. Plato spoke of a civilization lost to hubris. Early Gnostic texts spoke of the word before the word, hinting at the existence of knowledge that cannot be fully expressed in language. In each case, the knowledge survived only as shadow, never as full activation, because the proper vessel was rare. The sequence had power beyond comprehension, and power without preparation is dangerous. Consider what this means for us today. Humanity has accumulated more information than any civilization before it. But coherence, internal, ethical, nervous system coherence remains largely undeveloped. Our brains are hyperstimulated, distracted, fragmented. And yet, in small pockets, the same principle emerges. Meditation, breathwork, somatic practices, sound healing, these are attempts, consciously or not, to recreate the conditions the Atlanteans understood. The body and nervous system must be trained to hold stillness. The mind must be disciplined. Only then can resonance, the language of intelligence, be received without harm. The Atlanteans also understood that intelligence is relational. It is not transmitted as data. It is a conversation between consciousness and the field of awareness that underlies reality. The phrase was not a spell, not a prayer, not even a mantra in the sense we moderns understand. It was a calibration. And calibration is relational. You cannot command resonance. You can only attune yourself to it. The person untrained, the society unaligned, the ego inflated, these cannot hold resonance. The phrase, if misapplied, acts like a scalpel on unprepared tissue, and the result is chaos, fragmentation, sometimes madness. This is why the Atlantean sequence was tightly guarded, transmitted only through direct oral initiation, after years of preparation. Sound without preparation is noise. Noise in the nervous system is dangerous. The unprepared initiate who tried to speak the phrase outside its container would experience profound disorientation, sometimes permanent shifts in perception they could not integrate. The consequence was both personal and societal. The amplification of unconscious material, the projection of internal fragmentation into reality, and the destabilization of collective coherence. And so, Atlantis fell. Not under the waves, but within itself. Not because the knowledge was flawed, but because the people who held it were not ready. The phrase did not destroy the civilization. Misuse and unpreparedness did. Intelligence requires readiness, not cleverness. It requires alignment, not ambition. And the Atlanteans knew this as a matter of survival, not spirituality. The ethical dimension of consciousness was never optional. Fragments of the sequence survived in whispers, in coded symbols, in ritual chants. But the potency was diluted. Egypt preserved it in Heka. Greece encoded it in numbers. Hermetic tradition spoke of the word before the word. Mystical schools scattered traces in oral traditions. And yet, the principle remained intact. Alignment precedes activation. Vessel precedes voice. Preparation precedes insight. And this is the first lesson the modern seeker must understand. Divine intelligence is not a thing to be grasped or achieved. It is a state to be received. The sequence itself is not a tool, but a reflection of readiness. The Atlantean phrase did not create insight. It revealed it. Those unprepared saw only chaos. Those aligned experienced clarity. The phrase has always been a mirror. The mind, not the words, determines the result. The first step, then, is not to chase the phrase. It is to examine yourself, to quiet your mind, to prepare your nervous system, to align your ethics, to integrate shadow. The Atlanteans were not building an empire. They were building coherent vessels for intelligence. Civilization can be rebuilt only in coherence, not in accumulation. And when you finally understand this, when you realize that intelligence is not knowledge, that sound is not communication, and that the phrase is a mirror, not a tool, you will glimpse the profound truth the Atlanteans lived and died by. The power of consciousness cannot be separated from the integrity of the vessel that carries it. Only when the vessel is ready does the phrase speak. And only when the phrase speaks does the mind remember that thought itself is a reflection of something far greater. But there is a deeper layer to understand, one that Atlanteans called resonant ethics. It is not enough to quiet the mind or refine the nervous system. The heart itself must be prepared. Atlantis understood that intelligence is relational not only with the cosmos, but with the self. If the intent behind activation is selfish, if desire, fear, or egoic ambition is present, the phrase amplifies those distortions instead of revealing clarity. The Atlanteans taught that the vessel must carry integrity as much as capacity. They likened the unprepared mind to a mirror coated in dust. Even if the light hits perfectly, what reflects is only haze. Only when the mirror is cleaned through discipline, reflection, and ethical alignment does resonance produce true illumination. Moreover, they recognized that the phrase interacts with time differently than ordinary speech. It is a vibration that does not merely influence the present, but organizes potential across past and future neural pathways. The Atlanteans understood that uttering it too soon could fracture memory, distort perception, and unravel identity at once, leaving echoes that linger long after the voice falls silent. Hence, training was painstakingly gradual, building the nervous system's capacity to absorb and integrate without fragmentation. Sound, in their philosophy, is not simply heard, it is inhabited. And to inhabit it without preparation is to invite entropy into the mind itself. Finally, the Atlanteans understood the collective dimension. Consciousness is not isolated. The phrase resonates not only in the individual but across the field of human awareness. A misaligned speaker, therefore, risks not only their own coherence but the subtle architecture of the society around them. This is why secrecy was maintained with such rigor, and why the fall of Atlantis was not merely the collapse of a city, but a rupture in the collective alignment of human consciousness itself. The phrase, lost in its original form, did not vanish entirely. Its essence persisted, hidden in plain sight, embedded in language, myth, ritual, and culture. Atlantis may have fallen, but the principles that governed its resonance survived the flood, dispersed across civilizations, disguised as allegory, poetry, and song. Words themselves, in their earliest forms, were vessels for sound vibration, not mere tools of communication. Every syllable carried frequency, every intonation a key. To the untrained ear, these were simply stories, instructions, prayers. To the attuned, they were a map, a subtle guide toward resonance with intelligence beyond thought. Look to the oldest texts, and you begin to see patterns, repetitions, alliterations, tonal sequences hidden within scripture, epic poems, and sacred chants. The Hindus called it Shabda Brahman, the word as the ultimate reality. The Egyptians encoded tonal patterns into hieroglyphs, integrating them with geometry and ritual movement. The Greeks discovered that numbers themselves carry vibration, harmonics that can influence thought and perception. Even in indigenous traditions across the Americas, Africa, and Oceania, we find songs and chants preserved across generations. At first glance, they appear cultural or symbolic, but they are more. Each tonal arrangement, each rhythm, carries the echo of that lost Atlantean phrase, a fragment of resonance waiting for recognition. Yet, recognition alone is not enough. To hear the phrase, to feel it as it was intended, one must cultivate the vessel. The mind must be still, yes, but also ethically aligned. The heart must be open, yet disciplined. The body must be attuned, not tense. Sound is not passive. It interacts with every layer of being. The nervous system, the subtle body, even the biochemistry of thought. Atlantean training recognized this implicitly. One could not merely recite the phrase or mimic the chant. Without preparation, it amplifies instability. For those unready, it triggers disorientation, anxiety, and a sense of unraveling, a warning encoded in myth as madness, possession, or divine wrath. These warnings persist in folklore. Orpheus descending into the underworld, the priestess of Delphi consumed by prophecy, the shaman overwhelmed by spirit. They are echoes of the same principle. Intelligence too powerful for the vessel becomes dangerous. And yet, the potential remained. Across time, fragments resurfaced in moments of alignment. Renaissance thinkers glimpsed it through music, discovering ratios and harmonics that seemed to unlock new understanding. In Eastern meditation, the repetition of certain sounds, sa, hum, functions not only as focus but as calibration. Modern neuroscience now hints at what ancient civilizations knew intuitively. Sound shapes neural pathways, synchronizes hemispheres, influences attention, and even reorganizes perception. The Atlantean phrase, in essence, was an advanced application of these principles, a sequence of resonance precisely aligned with the natural intelligence of the mind and cosmos. The phrase operates on multiple levels simultaneously. On the surface, it is a sound. Below that, it interacts with the nervous system. Below that, it reorganizes neural patterns. Below that, it aligns perception with the flow of intelligence itself. Below all, it is relational. The phrase only resonates fully when the listener and speaker, or the practitioner within themselves, maintain alignment across all levels. Miss any one layer, and the effect becomes unpredictable. This is why the sequence was never written down, never simplified, and never taught casually. Sound is alive. Intelligence is alive. Both demand respect. Consider the implications. Modern humans are surrounded by sound, music, media, speech, yet rarely is it structured to align consciousness. Most sound amplifies distraction. Most music stimulates the ego or emotion without harmonizing the mind. Yet hidden within the collective audio field are echoes of the Atlantean sequence. Tonal motifs, rhythmic pulses, frequencies that resonate with the precognitive mind. Those who stumble upon them intuitively in meditation, in music, in ritual report, sudden clarity, inspiration, or insight. Yet without preparation, these experiences are fleeting. They become novelty or entertainment. The vessel is unready, the resonance unanchored. And this is where the modern seeker often goes astray. The phrase is not a magic formula to instant intelligence. It does not produce wisdom by itself. Its function is amplification. It amplifies readiness, alignment, and coherence, or it amplifies imbalance, distraction, and ego. If one's mind is cluttered, the phrase magnifies the clutter. If one's heart is fragmented, the phrase amplifies that fragmentation. This principle is critical. The power was never in the phrase. The power was in the alignment it reveals. The Atlantean phrase is a mirror, reflecting the readiness of the vessel. It is a test, not a toy. Those who chase it for novelty, for status, or for egoic stimulation will find only chaos. Yet fragments of the phrase are accessible even today, not because it has been fully transmitted, but because alignment persists. Certain chants, mantras, tonal sequences, and sacred words carry echoes that, when intoned with preparation, resonate with the deeper intelligence. In this way, the phrase was never truly lost. It was hidden in plain sight, waiting for the vessel capable of receiving it. Ancient civilizations recognized this principle intuitively. Words and sound were sacred, as the wrong vibration at the wrong moment could unravel reality itself. The right sound in the right vessel opens doors. The modern seeker must therefore ask, am I the vessel ready to hear what has always been present? Am I prepared ethically, neurologically, emotionally, and spiritually to integrate resonance without distortion? Ancient traditions provide preparation, not formula. Breath work, silence, fasting, meditation, movement, and ethical reflection were not optional. They created coherence in the nervous system and subtle body so that resonance could be received safely. When these practices are omitted, sound is merely noise. The vessel is unprepared, and chaos follows. Atlantis fell for precisely this reason. Preparation was abandoned, and amplification exposed instability instead of intelligence. The phrase is relational, but so is intelligence itself. Intelligence does not reside solely in the individual mind. It interacts with collective consciousness. The Atlanteans understood this. Misuse of the phrase in a misaligned society produced catastrophic amplification, fracturing both personal and collective coherence. For this reason, secrecy was not merely protective but essential. It preserved alignment and prevented harm. Every syllable carried responsibility, every intonation carried consequence. In modern terms, the phrase is not a shortcut, a trick, or a formula. It is a reflection of alignment, an invitation to embody readiness before resonance. Finally, The phrase "hidden in plain sight" challenges our assumptions about knowledge and wisdom. We, modern humans, seek information, external validation, and shortcuts. Atlantis, in contrast, cultivated vessels capable of carrying intelligence without distortion. Information alone is meaningless without coherence. Intelligence alone is dangerous without alignment. The Atlantean phrase, fragmentary, hidden, resonant, represents not a lost technology but a living principle. Preparation precedes activation, vessel precedes voice, and resonance reveals what is already present. Those who glimpse fragments of the sequence today, whether through meditation, sound healing, sacred chant, or intuitive practice, are touching the same principle. The phrase has always been waiting, embedded in culture, myth, and vibration. But recognition alone is insufficient. Only integration, preparation, and alignment allow the resonance to activate intelligence safely and fully. The phrase does not give. It reflects. It reveals. And in that reflection lies the greatest challenge and opportunity for the modern seeker. To become coherent enough to hear what has always been there. But the phrase "hidden in plain sight" was never merely historical. Its essence persists in subtle ways in modern times, if one knows how to listen. Consider music not just as entertainment, but as a vehicle of vibration. Certain notes, chords, and intervals evoke resonance in the nervous system, producing states of clarity, flow, or insight. Ancient civilizations understood this intuitively. In Atlantis, harmonic architecture was not decorative. It was functional. Temples were constructed not only to honor the divine, but to amplify and stabilize resonance. Singing, chanting, and tonal movement were integrated into daily life, aligning individual consciousness with the collective field. Today, we experience echoes of these practices in Gregorian chants, Indian ragas, Sufi zikr, and indigenous drumming. They are remnants of the Atlantean principle, waiting to be consciously engaged, rather than merely observed or performed. Modern humans often underestimate the subtlety of sound as intelligence. We reduce it to melody, rhythm, or pattern. But the Atlantean phrase functioned on multiple levels simultaneously. Each tonal fragment interacted with the mind, body, and spirit, reorganizing perception, tuning the nervous system, and aligning attention with the flow of conscious intelligence. At the same time, it resonated within the collective consciousness, subtly stabilizing group coherence. Misalignment at any layer, ethical, emotional, or neurological, results in distortion. For this reason, the Atlanteans guarded it so fiercely. It was not a chant for casual use, nor a tool for personal gain. It was a key, a calibrating instrument for intelligence itself. Fragments of the phrase also appear encoded in sacred texts, masked as allegory or symbolism. In Egyptian hieroglyphs, the repetition of certain phonemes aligns with the geometry of the temple and movement of the priest performing ritual chants. In Vedic texts, the intonation of each syllable corresponds to energy centers, subtle currents, and harmonic structures of consciousness. Even Greek philosophy, particularly Pythagorean numerology, reflects the resonance principle. Numbers, ratios, and intervals were not abstract. They were expressions of vibratory intelligence. Those attuned to frequency could perceive the structure underlying reality, guided by these hidden syllables. The Atlantean phrase was never meant to be fully transcribed. It was a living, performed resonance, experienced in situ, through voice, breath, and alignment. Modern seekers who stumble upon fragments often misinterpret them. Some treat chants as exotic rituals, disconnected from their purpose. Others approach them like a tool for relaxation, stimulation, or escapism. This is a fundamental misreading. The phrase does not entertain. It exposes. It mirrors readiness, alignment, and coherence, or it mirrors fragmentation, imbalance, and egoic distortion. To approach it casually is to invite chaos, not insight. This principle is consistent across all historical echoes. Sound is alive. Consciousness is alive. Both demand alignment. Both demand preparation. Both demand responsibility. And yet, there are ways to approach the fragments safely today, if one understands the underlying principle. Preparation begins with the vessel, the nervous system, the body, the mind, and the heart. Breathwork calms the nervous system, cultivating receptivity. Silence trains attention and focus, stabilizing the mind for subtle resonance. Ethical reflection and shadow work clear emotional and moral alignment, reducing internal interference that could distort the signal. Only then can fragments of the Atlantean phrase, whether as mantra, tonal chant, or musical sequence, resonate safely, producing clarity, insight, and intelligence amplification without chaos. It is also critical to understand that resonance is relational. The Atlanteans did not treat sound as isolated. Singing alone in a chaotic or unaligned state produces no true calibration. In community, however, resonance amplifies, stabilizes, and integrates across individuals. Sacred ceremonies, reasonings, and collective chants in historical cultures, from Rastafari gatherings to Sufi zikr circles, echo this principle. The vessel is not only the individual, but also the field in which it participates. Misalignment in the collective creates distortion, just as coherence magnifies clarity. Even in modern practice, community, guidance, and reflection are essential. Insight without integration is fleeting. Resonance without container is noise. The modern challenge, then, is twofold. First, to recognize that fragments of the Atlantean phrase are present, waiting to be attuned. Second, to prepare as a vessel capable of receiving them. Those who approach these fragments superficially for novelty, stimulation, or status may feel a fleeting sense of connection, a spark of insight that cannot be integrated. This is what ancient texts warn against as madness or possession, amplification without coherence. True resonance requires sustained alignment, mental clarity, emotional maturity, somatic stability, and ethical readiness. When these conditions are met, the fragment becomes a key, unlocking perception and intelligence that appear to emerge spontaneously. The principle extends beyond personal experience. The Atlantean phrase demonstrates that intelligence is not a static property of the brain or thought. It is relational, interactive, and contextual. It flows through the vessel into the field, into collective awareness, and back. To misuse or misalign, it is to risk destabilization of both individual and collective coherence. This is why Atlantis fell. The knowledge was not flawed, but the alignment of the society was compromised. Ethical lapses, egoic ambition, and internal fragmentation amplified the sequence destructively rather than constructively. The collapse was not a literal sinking of a city, but a rupture in the collective intelligence of civilization itself. Finally, the phrase, "hidden in plain sight," teaches a critical lesson for modern seekers. Resonance cannot be forced. It cannot be attained through desire alone, nor by external mimicry. It requires presence, integrity, preparation, and alignment. The fragments we encounter today, chants, tonal motifs, sacred words, or sequences encoded in tradition, are invitations, not guarantees. They are mirrors, reflecting readiness and coherence, exposing imbalance and unpreparedness. To approach the fragments responsibly is to cultivate the vessel, mind, body, heart, and ethics in alignment. Only then can the resonance produce clarity, intelligence, amplification, and the subtle calibration of perception that the Atlanteans mastered. The Atlantean phrase, therefore, is both hidden and everywhere. It survives in music, chant, poetry, sacred ritual, and even natural resonance, the wind in trees, the rhythm of rivers, the pulse of the earth. It is an invitation to attune, to prepare, and to integrate. To ignore preparation is to invite chaos. To ignore alignment is to miss the opportunity. But to cultivate coherence, presence, and ethical maturity is to step into the living echo of Atlantis, to hear fragments of a sequence that unlocks the intelligence that has always been within, waiting, patient, and hidden in plain sight. Walking through resonance is not a metaphor. It is a literal, embodied experience. The Atlanteans understood that intelligence is not captured in thought alone. It is activated through the body, the nervous system, and the subtle energies that circulate within and around us. To walk through the phrase is to inhabit its vibration fully, to allow it to interact with every layer of the self, and to integrate its echo into perception, emotion, and action. This process is not linear, and it cannot be rushed. There is a rhythm, a pulse, an internal sequencing that must be honored. It begins with stillness, not the kind imposed by distraction-free environments or meditation apps, but the profound stillness of presence. A stillness where the body softens, the mind settles, and the heart opens without expectation. In Atlantis, preparation was ritualized. Each day, before the utterance of a sacred sound or the performance of a tonal sequence, the practitioner would engage in a series of alignment practices. Breathwork stabilized the nervous system, while movement released tension and aligned the body's natural flow. Ethical reflection and shadow work cleared internal distortions. Silence, maintained in cycles throughout the day, attuned attention to subtle frequencies. Only then could the practitioner approach the phrase as a vessel rather than a weapon. The Atlanteans recognized that resonance is amplifying. It does not discriminate between clarity and chaos. The same sequence that ignites intelligence in a prepared mind can unravel an unprepared consciousness. This duality is central to understanding the phrase, "Power manifests only when the vessel is prepared. Coherence precedes resonance, and alignment is prerequisite to illumination." Walking through resonance also requires an understanding of the relationship between sound and perception. The Atlantean phrase was never a static utterance. It was a living vibration, interacting dynamically with the body, mind, and environment. Each syllable, each intonation, each pause is a thread woven into the intricate fabric of consciousness. As one progresses, the phrase begins to interact with subtle energies, activating dormant pathways in the nervous system, reorganizing perception, and harmonizing thought with the flow of intelligence. Practitioners often describe a feeling of unfolding awareness, where thought, sensation, and intuition align in a coherent field. This is not mystical hyperbole. Modern research into sound and consciousness increasingly confirms that vibration can synchronize neural oscillations, enhance focus, and facilitate insight. The Atlanteans, however, had developed this understanding to a level where sound and consciousness were inseparable and inseparably ethical. Ethics, indeed, are integral to walking through resonance. The Atlanteans taught that misalignment is not a failure of the phrase but of the practitioner. If intention is selfish, distracted, or ego-driven, the phrase mirrors that misalignment. Amplification without preparation can result in confusion, emotional turbulence, and distorted perception. In modern terms, this is why many people experience fleeting inspiration or insight from sound or chant, but fail to integrate it into meaningful action. The resonance may be present, but the vessel is incomplete. Walking through the resonance requires integrity, readiness, reflection, and coherence across mental, emotional, and physical layers. It is not enough to experience sound. One must embody it, live it, and allow it to reorganize not just perception but action. Integration is the next step. Resonance is not a state to be admired or a sensation to be chased. It is an instrument, a lens, a mirror. The Atlanteans understood that insight without integration is chaos, and vibration without grounding is dangerous. Each encounter with the phrase required reflection. What does this reveal about myself? What patterns are amplified? Where is alignment present, and where is imbalance being exposed? Walking through resonance is walking into the feedback of the self. It is confronting shadows, fears, and unresolved impulses. Yet this confrontation is not punitive. It is instructive. It provides the data necessary to refine alignment, to strengthen coherence, and to expand intelligence without distortion. The Atlantean phrase was, in essence, a self-correcting mirror. It does not create truth. It reveals readiness. Furthermore, resonance is relational. The Atlanteans did not approach the phrase in isolation. Collective practice was essential because the field of consciousness amplifies and stabilizes coherence. Group resonance is not merely symbolic, it is energetic. When aligned individuals engage together in sound, the collective vibration stabilizes each participant, creating a shared field of coherence. Conversely, misalignment within the collective can disrupt even the most prepared individual. This principle is echoed in historical and indigenous traditions. From Rastafari reasoning sessions to Sufi Zikr circles, communal engagement enhances clarity and integration. Modern solitary practice, while valuable, carries the risk of amplification without containment. A prepared individual in a supportive group can achieve integration more efficiently, while the same practice alone may reveal unprocessed fragmentation. Walking through resonance also reveals the subtle interplay between sound and the body. The phrase interacts with the nervous system, the energy body, and the subtle architecture of perception. When the vessel is aligned, the resonance harmonizes neural oscillations, activates dormant pathways, and cultivates a heightened state of awareness. Breath, posture, and intention modulate this interaction. Slow, deep breaths stabilize perception. Grounded posture aligns subtle currents. Clear intention directs amplification toward insight rather than distraction. Atlantean practitioners understood that even minor misalignments, a tense body, a distracted mind, or unintegrated emotion, could distort the resonance, producing confusion rather than illumination. Walking through resonance, therefore, is not passive. It is a dynamic process of tuning the vessel, listening to feedback, and adjusting continuously. Time itself behaves differently within resonance. Atlantean texts describe it as non-linear, relational, and fluid. Walking through the phrase creates an expanded temporal field. Past, present, and future perceptions reorganize in a way that allows the practitioner to see patterns, consequences, and insights that ordinary consciousness misses. This is not metaphorical. Neuroscience increasingly shows that certain rhythmic vibrations and tonal sequences can enhance pattern recognition, creative problem-solving, and temporal integration. The Atlantean phrase harnessed this principle with precision, enabling practitioners to access multi-layered perception without destabilizing identity. Preparation was essential, because unready minds cannot navigate this temporal fluidity. Without grounding, the amplification of memory and perception could overwhelm, creating distortion instead of clarity. The ultimate stage of walking through resonance is embodiment. The Atlanteans did not value insight for its own sake. Knowledge is meaningful only when enacted. The phrase activates intelligence, yes, but the practitioner's task is to integrate, to apply, and to manifest alignment in daily life. Insight is measured not by the intensity of experience, but by the coherence of action. Walking through resonance is, therefore, not a journey into altered perception alone. It is a disciplined practice of translating subtle intelligence into lived reality. Alignment is validated through choices, relationships, and integrity in ordinary life. Only then does the phrase fulfill its purpose. It mirrors intelligence and guides it into actionable wisdom. Finally, walking through resonance cultivates a deeper understanding of self, others, and the cosmos. Each utterance, each chant, each vibratory encounter reveals layers of readiness, imbalance, and potential. It shows where shadow and light coexist, where patterns can be refined, and where alignment is possible. It is a process of continual calibration. Intelligence, in this sense, is not static. It is dynamic, relational, and responsive. Walking through the phrase is a lifelong practice, refining the vessel, harmonizing perception, integrating insight, and aligning action with the highest potential of coherence. In conclusion, the Atlantean phrase is not a formula to be recited, a mantra to be performed superficially, or a shortcut to intelligence. It is a living, relational vibration, a mirror reflecting readiness and alignment. Walking through the resonance requires stillness, preparation, ethical reflection, nervous system tuning, and integration. It demands relational awareness, communal engagement, and embodiment. It reveals what is present, amplifies coherence, and exposes misalignment. And only through disciplined practice, reflection, and action can the practitioner move beyond reflection into transformation, turning resonance into wisdom, vibration into intelligence, and insight into aligned living. If this journey into the lost Atlantean phrase has stirred something within you, it's time to take the next step. True insight doesn't end with watching or reading. It begins with practice, reflection, and integration. Begin observing your own resonance, cultivating stillness, and preparing your vessel for the subtle frequencies waiting to awaken your intelligence. Join our community of seekers, explorers, and truth holders who are walking this path together. Sign up for our newsletter to access exclusive guides, practices, and deeper explorations into forgotten wisdom. Step beyond curiosity. Step into alignment. Let the knowledge you've uncovered today move from mind to embodiment, from reflection to action. The door is open. Are you ready to walk through?